My dad really thought he had ruined me when he raised his hand and slapped me across the face in front of 200 people. The entire wedding ballroom fell silent. I just stood there, clutching my burning cheek, staring at the family who had spent the evening stuffing themselves with food purchased by my hard-earned $12,500. My parents had actually called me greasy garbage and thrown me out because they were terrified that my exhausted, worn-out appearance would damage their fake high society image in front of the new in-laws. They thought they could drain me for money, use me to buy their way into a wealthy family, and then throw me away like trash. But they forgot one very important detail. My name was on the contracts, and I was about to turn their perfect night into a complete nightmare. My name is Chloe. For 24 years, I was the invisible pillar holding my family together. I was the daughter who swallowed her dreams, accepted every sacrifice, and worked herself to exhaustion so everyone else could chase their perfect lives. I grew up in a home where love wasn't unconditional. It was transactional. Back then, I didn't realize it. I honestly believed that if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, and never complained, my parents, Richard and Eleanor, would finally look at me with the same pride they reserved for my younger sister, Lily. Lily was always the golden child. She was beautiful, carefree, and pampered, while I was the dependable one handling the harsh reality of our family's financial struggles. I wore the cheaper clothes, I skipped college trips to save money, I stayed up late helping my mother repair and maintain the house. I was proud of being the strong one. I believed that being a good daughter meant always putting myself last. When Lily started dating Marcus, everything changed. Marcus came from an old money family, the kind of wealthy family that owned multiple properties and never bothered to check price tags. Almost overnight, my parents became obsessed with keeping up appearances. Richard suddenly started speaking with a fake sophisticated accent, and Eleanor began buying designer knockoffs, desperate to look like she belonged among the elite. They were determined to project the image of a wealthy, successful family. I watched it all from the sidelines, happy that Lily was happy, completely unaware that my own family measured my value only by how much money they could squeeze out of me before discarding me. I had no idea that my willingness to sacrifice was about to be used against me in the cruelest way imaginable. The real nightmare began about 4 months before the wedding. My parents had completely lost touch with reality while planning a wedding they couldn't afford. They booked a stunning historic estate downtown and hired a luxury catering company that charged a fortune per plate. They wanted 5-star service, ice sculptures, premium liquor, and every expensive detail imaginable. The problem was simple. Their credit cards were maxed out and their bank accounts were nearly empty. I'll never forget the night my mother walked into my room, her eyes red from crying, carrying a stack of overdue bills. She dropped to her knees beside my bed. Grabbing my hands, she sobbed as she explained that the venue was threatening to cancel the booking and that Marcus's family would discover the truth, that they were broke. "It will destroy our reputation, Chloe," she cried. "Lily's future will be ruined before it even begins. Please, you have to help us." My father stood quietly in the doorway, looking defeated. He promised they only needed a temporary loan and swore they would repay every cent. At the time, I believed them. I already worked a full-time corporate office job, but it wasn't nearly enough to cover such a massive shortfall. So, without telling anyone except my parents, I secretly took on a second job. I started working nights at a 24-hour diner called the Greasy Spoon. The work was brutal. My schedule became a nightmare. I worked my office job from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., drove straight to the diner, changed into a heavy uniform, and spent the night scrubbing grease-covered vents, flipping burgers, hauling trash, and mopping floors until 3 a.m. For 4 straight months, I survived on barely 3 hours of sleep each night. My hands were covered in small grease burns. My skin broke out from the constant heat of the kitchen. My back hurt so badly that some mornings I could barely stand upright. Every dollar I earned from those exhausting night shifts went into a separate savings account. I didn't spend a penny on myself. I skipped meals, wore worn-out shoes, and pushed my body far beyond its limits. By the end of those 4 months, I had saved exactly $12,500. I felt like a hero. I was exhausted. My health was falling apart. But I believed I had saved my sister's wedding and finally earned my family's love and respect. I couldn't have been more wrong. The betrayal came just 48 hours before the wedding. I walked through our front door shortly after midnight, completely drained after my final shift at the diner. My feet ached, my hair was tied in a messy bun. I smelled like cooking oil, sweat, and industrial cleaning chemicals. But in my hand, I carried something important. A certified receipt from the catering manager showing that the final $12,500 balance had been paid in full. The wedding was saved. I walked into the kitchen expecting relief and gratitude. Instead, Richard and Eleanor looked up at me with expressions of pure disgust. My mother immediately covered her nose and stepped backward. Trying to smile through my exhaustion, I held out the receipt. "It's done," I whispered. "The venue and catering are fully paid for." My mother didn't even reach for the paper. She looked me up and down and let out a long, irritated sigh. "Chloe," she said coldly, "just put it on the counter. You're tracking grease and filth through the house. Go wash your hands." I blinked, and suddenly the exhaustion felt twice as heavy. "Mom," I said quietly, "I just spent 4 months scrubbing floors to earn this money. A simple thank you would be nice." That's when my father pushed back his chair and stood up. He didn't look grateful, he looked embarrassed. His face turned a deep shade of red as he walked toward me. Stopping inches away, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "You can't come to the wedding looking like that, Chloe. Look at your hands. Look at your skin. You look completely ragged." For a moment, I thought he was joking. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "I bought a dress. I'm the maid of honor." "Not anymore," Richard said coldly. "Marcus's family is old money, high class. They're bringing judges, executives, and politicians to this wedding. If they see you looking like a tired diner worker, you'll embarrass us and damage our reputation." My stomach dropped. "We already told Marcus's parents that you came down with a serious flu," he continued. "They're expecting you to stay home." I stared at him in disbelief. The room seemed to spin around me. Then I looked toward the couch, where Lily sat scrolling through her phone. "Lily," I said, my voice shaking, "are you hearing this? I practically destroyed my body so you could have this wedding. Tell them they're being ridiculous." Lily didn't even look up. She examined her freshly manicured nails and shrugged. "I mean, Chloe," she sighed, "you do smell pretty bad right now, and wedding photos last forever. Just stay home and rest. It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal?" My voice cracked. Tears burned in my eyes. "I paid for the food you're going to eat," I shouted. "I paid for the ballroom you're going to dance in." "And we appreciate the help," my father snapped, cutting me off. "But right now you're greasy garbage, Chloe. You don't fit into the life we're building for Lily. Stay in your apartment and don't ruin this wedding." The words hit harder than a slap. After everything I had done, everything I had sacrificed, they had reduced me to a problem that needed to be hidden. I stood there in silence, holding the receipt that proved I was nothing more than a wallet they had emptied and tossed aside. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I sat alone in my apartment and cried until my throat hurt. Across the room hung the simple pastel dress I had bought on clearance. I had been so excited to wear it. For once, I wanted to stand beside my sister and feel beautiful. But as the hours passed, the sadness slowly turned into something colder, something stronger. By the afternoon of the wedding, I realized something important. My kindness had always been mistaken for weakness. If I stayed hidden in my apartment, I would be helping them tell their lie. So I wiped away my tears. I put on the dress. I covered the dark circles under my eyes with makeup. And I decided I was going to that wedding, not to beg for their love, not to cause a scene. I simply wanted to see what my $12,500 had paid for. I arrived shortly after the reception dinner began. The ballroom looked magnificent. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, guests laughed, sipped expensive wine, and complimented my parents on what they believed was a flawless event. I stayed near the back of the room, blending in with the catering staff. It didn't take long for my father to see me. The second he did, pure panic flashed across his face. His eyes widened. His face turned purple with rage. He stormed across the ballroom, grabbed my arm so hard it hurt, and dragged me into the marble foyer outside. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed. "I told you to stay away." I pulled my arm free. "I paid for this entire night, Dad," I said. I have every right to be here. You have no rights here, he shouted. You embarrass us just by existing. Then it happened. Before I could react, his hand shot through the air. Crack. The sound echoed through the foyer. Pain exploded across my cheek. I stumbled backward, barely keeping my balance. Suddenly, everything went silent. Guests near the entrance froze. Marcus's parents stopped in their tracks. Several executives, community leaders, and even the venue coordinator witnessed everything. Every single person saw my father slap me. I didn't scream. I didn't fight back. I simply stood there, holding my burning cheek while tears rolled down my face. Marcus's father looked horrified. His expression said everything. Without speaking another word, I turned around and walked out into the cold night air. As I sat inside my car, feeling my face begin to swell, something changed. The pain disappeared. In its place came absolute clarity. I picked up my phone. First, I called the venue coordinator. Then, I called the catering manager. Both knew exactly who I was because my signature appeared on every financial authorization form. Cancel my authorization for the open bar, I said calmly. Cancel the late-night extensions and the staff gratuities. There was a pause. Then I added, and if my parents try to use a credit card to cover it, run it immediately. It won't go through. After that, I made one final call. Marcus's father answered on the second ring. 3 hours later, my phone exploded with notifications. Missed call after missed call. Voicemail after voicemail. My mother, my father, my sister, all desperate, all panicking. I sat quietly in my living room and listened to my mother's voicemail. She was sobbing, begging. The truth had finally come out. I hadn't yelled at Marcus's father. I hadn't exaggerated. I simply told him the truth. I told him that the woman they called Greasy Garbage was the same person who had paid the entire $12,500 catering bill after Richard and Eleanor's credit cards had been declined months earlier. Marcus's father was disgusted, not only by the financial deception, but by the fact that they had publicly humiliated and assaulted their own daughter. Halfway through the reception, he stopped the music. In front of every guest, he confronted my parents. The celebration ended instantly. Marcus refused to stay another minute. He left with a devastated and humiliated Lily. And for the first time that night, my parents stood completely alone. The nightmare they created had finally become their own. To make things worse, because I had revoked my authorization, the venue immediately charged Richard a $5,000 penalty for unpaid bar expenses and staff fees. Money he didn't have. As I listened to my mother beg me to fix everything, I felt absolutely nothing. No guilt, no sadness, no regret, only peace. I blocked every one of their numbers. Then, for the first time in months, I went to sleep without carrying the weight of their problems on my shoulders. They had spent years protecting their reputation. In the end, they destroyed it themselves.